Good afternoon, everybody. Today we will be discussing normal wound healing and factors which affect wound healing. I'm sure this is a topic probably you have heard ad nauseum, but yeah. So we will start with wound healing, as all of you know, is a break in the continuity of the skin or tissues, which may often be associated with disruption of structure or function. Now, wound healing is a mechanism by which body attempts to restore the integrity of the injured part, isn't it? Yeah. Now, what are the aims of wound healing? Natural wound healing, or when a surgeon tries to heal a wound, the idea is to restore the cover of the body, because you're mainly dealing with the skin here. So you require the skin cover. So that is one thing. The other thing is the skin, it must regain its tensile strength. And if possible, we would like to restore the function. Now, one thing you must understand about healing is that all healing anywhere in the body takes place with scar formation, except very few tissues. Like, for example, now if it heals, it's scar formation. So the problem with the scar is that you are losing normal tissue in that area, which is being replaced by collagen tissue. You understand? So restoring function may not always be possible, but we do try to, nature tries to restore the function, and we try to help nature by restoring the function. Normal wound healing, again, you must have heard this ad nauseum. I'm just going to repeat it. We usually, in the olden days or previously, it was divided into 3 stages. That is, hemostasis and inflammation was phase 1, both combined into phase 1. Then we had proliferative phase and the remodeling phase, or remodeling or maturation. Now the terminology used for all of these different phases vary from textbook to textbook or speaker to speaker. I'll stick to this terminology. Yeah. But now we divide, the first phase has been divided into 2. So now we have a hemostasis phase, which stands to reason, isn't it? When your skin is injured, whatever the cause of the injury, there will be some degree of bleeding. So, or a disruption of the blood vessels. So first thing that the body has to do is to stop that bleeding. So you have hemostasis, which has 2 parts to it, isn't it? One is vasoconstriction and the other is coagulation. Then you have the inflammatory phase, where the body tries to repair the damage that has taken place. So you get all those inflammatory things, neutrophils and monocytes, and which later turn into macrophages, lymphocytes, all these infiltrate the area of the injury and tries to restore it by removing all the dead and necrotic material, all the infective organisms, all that. They are removed so that healing can take place. Then you have the proliferative phase. Once that area has been cleaned up, vasoconstriction and this stop bleeding first, then that area is cleaned up, and then you start rebuilding it. So you have reepithelialization, angiogenesis, and collagen synthesis, and extracellular matrix formation. Finally, the body is trying to reconstruct the and finally, once it has covered up that area, you get remodeling. Understand? Yeah. So that is when the tensile strength and all that comes back. Yeah. And obviously vascular maturation and all that. So all this I'm sure you're familiar with, and the pathology people must have drummed it into you. Yeah, this is again a repeat of the same thing. You can go to that side if you want. Yeah, this is showing you this in a graphic form. That's all. See, you have the initial inflammatory phase, and then you have the proliferative phase, and then you have the modeling phase, remodeling phase. Yeah. What practically we are more, unless you are going into research of healing and all that, probably you just need to know the basic, understand the basic theory, and not know, just understand. But what we are very practically find very useful is the timeline when all this occurs. So the inflammatory phase after an injury usually lasts from the time of injury for about 6 days. The proliferative phase, which we can also call, I told you there are various terminologies that I use. For proliferative phase lasts for about 4 weeks, that is 28 days. And the maturation phase starts at 4 weeks and goes on for many years, you know. Now the thing that we have to understand here is, even if healing goes on for 20 years, I'm just giving an example, alright? The tensile strength of the scar never attains 100%. Usually the maximum tensile strength that a scar can attain is usually about 80%. And this is usually achieved by the end of probably 12 weeks. So by 12 weeks you have 80% tensile strength, which is probably the maximum tensile strength that that particular area will ever have. You understand? That is why scar tissue breaks up much faster than normal skin. You know. Similarly, yeah. So that is the thing about scars. So that particular thing is important to remember. Now healing, I told you I am mainly concentrating on the skin, but other tissues also have to heal, isn't it? For example, if you have a fracture of the bone, it has to heal. So how does the bone heal? Fracture heal by the production of a callus. Now if there is a gap between the broken ends of the bone, you might get delayed union, you can get non-union. I have provided, see, that's what I said. So the healing does not take place normally, all these things can happen. I won't go into details of all this, you will learn it as you go along to orthopedics and all that. Now a nerve cell once destroyed can never regenerate. You understand? Epithelium can cover the area again, but a nerve cell once destroyed is lost. So we try to save nerve cells as far as possible. Never try to destroy but a nerve fiber can heal. You understand? So, and this takes place by what is called Wallerian degeneration. Again, you must have learned this in your physiology, pathology and all that. All this is a repetition of what you have learned, but I am trying to put it in the context of surgical practice. You understand? So, what happens here is you get Wallerian degeneration distally, and approximately degeneration is up to the first node of Ranvier that it encounters. Then the nerve fibers grow back by neurotrophism and all that. And you must have already heard about neuropraxia, axonotmesis and neuronotomesis. I won't go into the detail. So yeah, some of these heal, some of these don't heal and all that. Tendon healing of a tendon takes place through intrinsic blood supply, which the tendon gets through the vincular flow, and through the extrinsic nutrients which it can get by forming adhesions between the tendon and the tendon sheath. Now a tendon regains its tensile strength by about 6 weeks. So if you have ever seen a patient who has had a tendon injury, you will find that they are either put in a splint or a cast or immobilized in some way for 6 weeks, after which they start physiotherapy movement. That is because the tensile strength is usually regained by about 6 weeks. Yeah. So this is just a picture to show you malunion. See, obviously this is not the alignment that you want in this bone, isn't it? You want it to be straight, but it's healing. You can see the callus here, but it's healing it's not aligned properly. Yeah, this is probably going to go in for non-union. See, this is overlapping. Even this can unite, but again, this is not a good union, isn't it? Yeah. This is to show you a nerve with a Wallerian degeneration. See the nerve cell. Once this nerve cell is destroyed, nothing can save it. But if only the nerve fiber is destroyed, it will regenerate, provided the cover is intact. Yeah. So this is Wallerian degeneration. Yeah, this is a tendon. This is a flexor tendon of the finger, the longus and the brevis, and you can see the vincula brevis here. See vincula. Yeah, this is blood supply to the tendon comes through this. Now, if this is not absent or if it's cut somewhere here, it can probably get adherent to the tendon sheath, which can probably supply it with blood and nutrients, and it might heal. This is a close-up view of the tendon. Yeah. Now coming to types of wound healing. A wound heals there are 3-4 ways in which they heal. One is primary healing. When a surgeon does surgery in a elective surgery, for example, a surgeon is doing a hernioplasty on a patient. The wound that the surgeon creates is a clean wound. And after the surgery, what does the surgeon do? He closes the wound with sutures. You understand? So he's approximating the cut ends. This heals by primary intention. You understand? Is what happens. Sometimes what happens is, supposing for example the surgeon is doing an appendectomy, the patient has an appendectomy done, open appendectomy done, and the appendix is infected, so the wound gets contaminated by some fluid from the appendix. You understand? I'm giving you an example here. In that case, what happens is, what usually is done is you close up the muscle layer, but the skin and subcutaneous tissue is left open. Why? Because it is contaminated. If you close it, there is a tendency for this to get infected. So you don't. So you wait for about 2 days. Clean it and wait for about 2 days. Once it has become clean, you close it. This is called delayed primary healing. You suture it, you suture the ends, and then that heals. This is called delayed primary healing. Then you have secondary healing. Probably this slide is a little confusing. This is a better slide to. So this is primary healing I told you. Delayed primary healing I told you. In secondary healing, for example, patient cut his foot while playing or while walking somewhere. He hit his foot against something and he cut it. Diabetic patient, for example. Diabetes is a secondary. Anyway, and because the mud has got into the wound, it's become infected. Badly infected. In that situation, and supposing the patient comes to you after 4 or 5 days, infected wound, pus oozing out from the wound, obviously you cannot suture it and make it heal, isn't it? Because it's already infected. You will have to clean the wound, you will have to debride the wound till it becomes, you apply dressings till it becomes clean. And then the wound will heal. There is no need probably to suture it, it will heal by itself. But it will take much longer than the primary healing. You understand? So that is the difference between primary healing and secondary healing. And the other problem with secondary healing is it leaves a very bad scar. You understand? Irregular, bad scar. Unlike a surgical scar, which is usually neat, provided, the surgeon is good. So that is secondary healing. Then finally, if the full thickness of the skin is not broken, only the epithelial layer, for example, is broken, all that you do, like for example in an abrasion, it is a superficial injury. It does not go through the whole thickness of the skin. There, all that you have to do, you don't suture an abrasion, you understand? It heals by epithelialization. Whereas all the other, the primary and secondary, primary and delayed primary healing, you are suturing the wound. In secondary healing, it is healing from below upwards, from the depth superficially, you understand? In epithelialization, only the superficial layers are lost, so only the epithelium has to grow back, you understand? These are the various types of wound healing that you can get. Now classifying wounds, wounds can be classified in various ways depending upon the parameters that you are taking into consideration. In this case, we are taking whether the wound is tidy or untidy. So this classification, rank and weight is classification. As you can see here is a nice clean incised wound, and here is a untidy wound. The problem with an untidy wound is when this heals, your suturing is going to be very difficult. You understand? You will not get a clean scar like this. You will get a very irregular scar. It will take longer for healing. Then what happens? These edges, these corners sometimes will necrose. So lots of problems with irregular, untidy scars. Untidy wounds. Then you can classify wounds depending upon the type of wound. That is, you can have clean incised wounds like in surgery, lacerated, irregular lacerated wound, you can have bruising, you can have contusions, you can have hematomas, all sorts of things, puncture wounds, close blunt injury. Like for example, a patient riding a bicycle goes and hits against a tree. What happens? He falls forward and his abdomen goes and hits the handlebar. Then he falls to the ground. All that he has is, I have a little pain in the abdomen. For all you know, he might be having a ruptured liver or a ruptured spleen. Externally, no injury, but internally, he has an injury. That's what I mean by closed blunt injury. Alright? This can take place in the thorax, anywhere, brain, Then you have puncture wounds and bites, abrasions. So like that goes on, traction and avulsion injuries, crush injuries, war wounds. Gunshot wounds can be of two types. It can be low velocity and high velocity. Then injury to the nerves, specific structures, injury to the nerves, arteries, veins, internal organs like I told you, liver, spleen, penetrating wounds, penetrating wounds, so like that. So based on the type of wound. Then these are some photographs showing you open wounds. Here it's an abrasion. See, when I say abrasion, it's only the superficial layers of the skin that are involved. Deeper layers are not involved. And this heals, you do not suture these wounds. These wounds, you just leave it alone, because all that has to happen is for the epithelium to form. You understand? And usually the function is restored 100%. You understand? This area will sweat, this area, all that. Because you have epithelium and, This is an incised wound, to show you an incised wound, alright? This is a lacerated, irregular lacerated wound, as you can see here. You see the difference between a neat incised, this is probably not very neat, but incised wound and a lacerated wound, isn't it? Irregular lacerated wound. See See, what happens is these areas can become devascularized. See, the pedicle is so small, blood has to come through this, isn't it? So you can get devascularized, you might have to remove all this. So in a wound like this, you will have to debride it and make these edges and all neat and then only suture it. So there is a problem with the... Now this is what is called a degloving injury. Like removing a glove, you have the trauma here has caused the skin of the finger to be removed like a glove. That's what we mean by a degloving injury. All right. Now here you can obviously understand. See, there is a disconnection between between this end and this end. So this blood supply to this is very tenuous. It has to get it from the deeper layers. Very tenuous. So there is always a chance that this skin at least will become gangrene, will lose its vitality. Sometimes it will survive, so it depends upon various factors, whether it is getting blood supply from the deeper areas, etc., etc. I won't go into that now, we'll come to that later. Yeah. This is a crush injury, you understand? Now, with a crush injury, besides the injury to the skin, the deeper structures can also be injured, isn't it? You can have fracture of the bone. If it is the chest, you can have a pneumothorax, you can have contusion of the chest, of the lung. Like that, a lot of the deeper structures can be injured. Besides that, the problem with the crush injury is that in a clean or in a lacerated wound, the injury is only along the line of the laceration, isn't it? Here, besides the that whole area gets devitalized, crushed, isn't it? So the vascularity is compromised, there is edema in that whole area, so further reducing the circulation to that area, which in turn will reduce the oxygen supply. So crush injuries are much more worse than a clean and then a lacerated wound. Yeah, I was talking to you about missile wounds or See, this is a low velocity missile wound, which is almost like a knife being thrust into the body part. You understand? Whereas a high velocity missile wound produces what is known as a cavitation effect. I'm sure you learn all this in your pathology. Somewhere pathology, I think. Yeah, definitely pathology is good to us about. So what happens is, besides, see, this is the path of the bullet, but the injury can spread all around. This is called what is called the cavitation effect. So that is one parameter that we used. The other parameter that we can use is the thickness of the injury. You understand? Sorry. Thickness of the injury. So it could be superficial, where it involves only the epidermis and the dermal papillae. Partial thickness, where it involves the deep dermis also. Full thickness, where the whole skin and the subcutaneous tissue is injured. Or you can have deep wounds, where not only the skin, but structures deep to the deep fascia, that is the muscle, the tendon, the bone, or whatever, can get injured. You can have complicated wounds, where besides the skin, you get injury to the vessels, to the nerves, or something like that. And or you have penetrating injuries, where in penetrating injuries, the entry, the site of the wound on the skin might be small, but it will have gone to a great depth, so that though there is only a small skin injury, deeper structures would be injured. Like, for example, a bullet injury. In the abdomen, for example, it will not only injure the skin and the muscle, it will injure the liver, it can injure the spleen, it can injure the intestine, it can injure so many things, isn't it? So that is the problem with either a stab wound or penetrating injury or anything that penetrates into into the body cavity. Yeah. Then, based upon the structures that are involved, that is, you can have a simple wound. For example, an injury, laceration to the skin is a simple wound, or blunt injury producing a laceration in the liver. Again, it's a simple injury because only a single organ is involved. You can have combined injuries where you have multiple organs and tissues being injured. Like, for example, I told you blunt abdominal trauma. You get a contusion in the chest abdominal wall, and then you get a liver laceration, like that. So multiple organs. Or injury to the wrist, cut the wrist, you cut the skin, you cut the nerve, you cut the vein, you cut the artery, or tendon, all that. So it becomes a combined wound. So I told you wounds can be classified based on various parameters. So I've given you some examples of the classifications that we can use. Yeah. The other way in which you can look at it is whether it's an acute wound or a chronic wound. Wounds less than 8 hours after injury, seen less than 8 hours after injury can be classified as an acute. More than 8 hours is chronic. Now this criteria is changing, but this is what I use now. Yeah. The importance of this is when you want to repair the wound. See, you can do suture wounds only during a certain period. Olden days it used to be 6 hours. It was called the golden period. Injury seen within 6 hours, you can clean, provided the wound is clean, you can suture it. After 6 hours, you don't suture it. You leave it for secondary suturing, cleaning and then secondary suturing. So that is one of the important of this. So this is basically about wound healing. Now there are various factors which come into play when a wound heals. You understand? We already talked about normal healing where you have hemostasis, inflammation, proliferation and remodeling. But these stages, these 4 phases can be affected by various other factors which in turn will either delay wound healing, may produce infection, again delaying, reduce the tensile strength, may reduce the function. Various things can happen. So there can be problems with the healing. So the factors which affect wound healing are, see again, there are so many classifications available. I am using this which I think is quite simple and fairly easy to remember. Yeah. So this I have 2-3 classifications I given. You can go through them. I will discuss it under this. Yeah. So local factors, desiccation. Obviously, if the wound is dry, it will not heal. For even a simple ulcer, if it is dry, if you keep it perfectly dry, it will not heal. There must be a certain amount of moisture for it to heal. If there is infection in the wound or abnormal bacteria present in the wound, obviously it will not heal. Now, any wound, there will always be a minimal amount of bacteria. You can't produce injury, and even in the best theatre probably you cannot produce a completely aseptic setting. It is not possible. You will get organisms coming from the personnel around it or something like that. Somewhere or the other, you will definitely get. But minimal amounts of organisms, the body is able to tackle. That is to say, it can kill. But when the body's defenses are overwhelmed, then you get an active infection. Understand? So don't ever think that all incisions are clean. They all contain bacteria, but their bacterial load is minimal. The body is able to tackle it. The body is able to overcome. But when the bacterial load becomes too much, or when the body's immune system is compromised due to any number of reasons, then you will get an infection in the wound. So that's what happens. Then maceration, that is when the area is wet, not moist, but wet. Like for example, a patient who has say paraplegia and is bedridden all the time. He is passing motion and urine on the mattress where he is lying. His buttocks, everything gets wet all the time. It gets macerated. Yeah, do not heal. Pressure, same thing, same patient. Lying in the same posture all the time, pressure. What happens when there is pressure? It compresses the skin and the tissues between the bone and on the area on which the patient is lying. Between this, say for example, the mattress and the bone, all the tissues get compressed, so the vascularity is reduced and you get necrosis and you get what is called a pressure sore. Trauma and edema, repeated trauma in an area, obviously that area will not heal, isn't it? Edema again, because it reduces the blood supply to the area, again it will not heal. So this is I'll show you another slide which includes other local factors. Then coming to systemic factors, age, elderly people and very young people, healing is reduced. Body type, obese people, healing is reduced. Chronic diseases, diabetes or anything which reduces immunity, immunosuppression due to any cause. Either you are giving active immunosuppression, like for example a patient has had a renal transplant, you are getting immunosuppression, so obviously healing will be reduced. Or the patient has a disease where there is immunosuppression, HIV for example, again that is AIDS, again nutritional status, obviously common sense, isn't it? If the patient has poor nutritional status, radiation is another. So the radiation, certain areas which have been irradiated do not heal well. And vascular insufficiency. I told you, without blood supply, the area cannot get all the nutrients. We talked about the proliferation phase. For this proliferation to take place, you require good blood supply, isn't it? So if there is insufficient blood supply, obviously healing will not be good. This is another slide showing you almost the same things, but you can see there are certain differences. I took this as multiple slides because probably a little lazy to incorporate all of them into a single this thing. But it looks nicely. This particular diagram, I like it. Yeah. So again, this is local factors. We already talked about ischemia, infection, foreign bodies. If there is a foreign body in the womb, obviously it will not heal because the body will be still trying to eject that foreign body. You understand? So it will not heal. It will always be in that proliferative phase. Yeah, edema and the increased pressure we already talked about. Systemic we already talked about. Age and gender. I say sex hormones. It is believed that estrogen helps in healing. I'm not talking about large quantities, but yeah. In a female, probably because of the estrogen, they heal, especially elderly, the older female, they heal better than a male patient. So there are various reasons. Something, what the hypothesis is that the estrogen helps in the healing, whereas the testosterone prevents healing. That is one hypothesis. The mechanism I will not go into. Yeah. Stress, mental, psychological stress is a big negative factor for anything in life, isn't it? Including healing. Ischemia, we already said. When will you get ischemia? Like for example, the lower limb. A patient has peripheral occlusive arterial disease. Say for example, is a diabetic with atherosclerosis and reduced pulses or no pulses in the right lower limb. Obviously, it will not heal because there is ischemia. Various other causes for ischemia. Diseases, we already discussed chronic diseases, isn't it? Obesity, we already said. Medication. If the patient is on steroids, for example, which suppresses immunity, or NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory, all this will reduce healing. Obviously, alcoholism and smoking, again, reduces healing. Smoking, it interferes with collagen formation various ways. Immune compromised conditions, we already discussed. Nutrition, we already discussed. So impaired healing, infection, ischemia, edema, elevated tissue pressure, and foreign bodies. This is local factors, all right? These are the systemic factors. Yeah. Besides all this, there are other factors which also affect wound healing. The site of the wound. Like for example, a wound in the scalp heals much better than a wound in the toe. You understand? The reason is because of the increased vascularity. The face and the scalp or the scrotum, external scrotum, very good vascularity. So these wounds in these areas heal much better than wounds in other areas. The structure that is involved, I already told you about healing in the bone, the nerve and all that. Depending upon what structure is involved, the healing will vary. You understand? The mechanism of the injury, yeah, that again, I told you an incision. A surgeon making an incision for an elective surgery, it's a clean, incised wound which will heal much better than a crush injury. I told you about crush injuries, where the whole thing is crushed between two things. You get reduced vascularity, increased edema, all sorts of problems. Crush plus avulsion is even worse. I showed you an avulsion injury, yeah, and if there is also crush, obviously. So the type of injury or the mechanism which caused the injury is very important. Obviously, there is loss of tissue. Like for example, avulsion injury. I showed you that avulsion injury picture. Supposing there are a lot of tissue is also lost. Obviously, the healing will be delayed because you cannot approximate it, or the tissue has to grow back. Yeah, so loss of tissue. So these are some other factors which are very important in healing. Yeah, this is again another slide. See, I told you all this. We have already gone through all these mechanisms. So, yeah, this is a slide showing you how diabetes reduces the healing. I told you diabetes very important from the practical point of view, because we have a very large number of patients who are diabetic, and they come with all sorts of wounds which we will find difficult to treat because the healing, one is the immunocompromised, secondly they have problems with the arterial supply, so a lot of reasons. Then they have neuropathies, so they get repeated trauma, all sorts of problems. So diabetics, we find that healing of wounds is very poor. Yeah, this is another slide showing you why obesity produces poor wound healing. Yeah, you can read these slides as and when you get time. I'm not going to go into explanations for all this. I want you to have a basic idea of what is happening. Now, after learning all these things, we have to put it into practical use, isn't it? So, when you have a patient with a laceration, you should know when you can suture it. I told you our intention is for primary healing. We want the wound to heal primarily. So for that, you have to close the edges, isn't it? You have to approximate the edges. You can't leave them like that. So yeah, so you will suture. So the question is when. In the olden days, we used to call it the golden period, which is 6 hours after surgery. The period from injury to 6 hours, you can suture it. After 6 hours, you don't suture it. You do secondary, delayed primary suturing. All right? Yeah. That used to be the olden. But nowadays it has changed. Even in the olden days, I told you head and face or even the scrotum, external genitalia, very vascular areas, you can suture it even if the wound was 24 to 48 hours prior to your seeing it. You understand? So even after 24 or 48 hours, you can probably suture it and you still get good primary healing. Right? Other areas of the body, it is said now, I told you now, recently it has been said that you can suture it even up to 19 hours after the injury. Understand? So that is how it has changed from the 6 hours rule. Previously the 6 hours rule used to be in effect. Now this, I told you this 19 hours is dependent upon a lot of factors which I already told you about. So if the patient is a diabetic, if you think the wound is badly contaminated and there is poor vascularity in that region, patient, supposing the wound is on the leg and there is a reduced blood supply to that leg, obviously you cannot suture it after 19 hours. So then you have to again do delayed primary suture. So that is about the time. So besides this time, I told you the time is a very important factor because it's very easy to get, rely purely on the time, provided the patient is lucid or you know the time when the injury took place, which is comparatively easy. But there are many other hidden factors which again, we already discussed this under factors affecting healing, but I'm just going through it too so that we can refresh our this thing. So before you decide on the suturing, you will look at the time since injury, which we already discussed. If the patient is a diabetic, in a diabetic patient, you will, in an injury which is old, you will not do primary suturing. You will wait for the wound to become clean and do delayed suturing. If the vascular supply is compromised, or if the tissue is devitalized, I told you crush injury or avulsion injuries and all, the tissue can be devitalized, so you will not suture it. If there is a retained foreign body in the wound, you will not suture. You have to remove the foreign body, clean the wound, and then if the patient's immune status is compromised, if there is bacterial contamination, obviously you cannot see the bacteria with the eye, but if there is pus, all that you know that there is bacterial contamination. Location of the wound, I told you head and face, it heals well even if it is a little delayed. Then the causative factor, I told you crush injuries and things like that, penetrating injuries, high velocity missile wounds, all these things heal badly. Yeah, that about completes the topic. So basically what I want you to know is, one, you know those phases of healing. Secondly, you should know how healing takes place. I told you primary healing, secondary healing, delayed primary healing and all that. Thirdly, you must know the time duration during which these things take place. I told you. So tensile strength comes back only after, for the skin or abdomen wall for example, only after about 12 weeks, and that too only 80%. You understand? A tendon, probably a bone even, usually about 6 weeks. So that's the other thing that you must keep in mind, because this is all got practical application in how you treat a patient. Then you must know all those factors which affect healing. Very important, because unless you correct those factors, the wound is not going to heal. So you must know all this. Then the timing of suturing, skin suturing, that is what I discussed last, again important. The area that is involved, the timing, always important. So these are some things that you must know about wound healing and management of skin wounds probably. Thank you.